Hello everyone and welcome to something different here on Transport Fever 2. Today I'm going to be doing a tutorial on station designs and a little bit of other stuff in Transport Fever 2. And for this I've built a purpose-made map, although I might be going back to some of my other save games to show you some examples. So let's get into it. So I will be starting off this tutorial with terminus stations. For the purpose of this, a terminus station is one where tracks come out in only one direction. Now for all of the stations on this I have made sure to include both passenger and cargo platforms. Some of these stations I have built have been deliberately done as good as I would usually do it, and some of them have used designs that I would usually not do deliberately just to show you why I wouldn't use them. Now, this first terminus station here is two platforms. What I have done is on both of these two platforms it gets split between passenger and cargo. Now, there are advantages and disadvantages to this. Advantage is that you can have two platforms and any two trains could arrive, whether it's two passenger trains as we have now, two cargo trains, or one passenger and one cargo train. The disadvantage of this is splitting up of the platform. The loading speed of all trains is reduced because if they can't fit in the platform fully, which means trains are going to be there for longer generally. You'll also be able to store fewer passengers and cargo, depending on the platform type, on each platform, which could affect it. Now, sometimes this might be worth it, but I would suggest doing something else. This here is a terminus station with both one cargo platform and one passenger platform. Now, a slight problem with this is this station is totally overloaded. There is a bit of a capacity issue. And there is an issue with the junction, which I will come back to later. But for now, just know that, two platforms splitting them up doesn't necessarily solve anything. You'll still see trains are waiting around a lot. But let's go for something else. This here is probably a decent terminus station for busy, with a good balance of passenger and cargo trains. You've got two passenger platforms and two cargo platforms. Each island platforms. And now I'm going to go to talk about junctions and crossovers on terminus stations. So, if we just go back to our initial one, that's got one simple crossover. Now there is a bit of a thing here of where you put the crossover. If you get it close to the station, you're running the risk of trains overlapping onto the crossover, which means they won't be able to turn around and go on to the correct track, which will cause a lot of issues. However, the further back you put it, the more time you're having for trains to run on bidirectional tracks, which can cause hold-ups. So it's a big balancing act as to where you put it. But that's just simple two-line setup. Now a two-platform terminus station. How do you do it in a couple of different scenarios? So, back to this station here with four platforms. This is one example of a crossover you can use for four-platform station. As you can see, there is crossover between the two middle tracks, and then the two outer tracks merge and there is another crossover. Now, in order for this to work like it does here, the second crossover, which is used by the outer tracks, must have a lower speed limit than the first crossover, and that just ensures that trains in and out of the middle platform use the first crossover. There are also other ways to do it, such as you could have two sets of two tracks and have a crossover between each of them, or you could have a interesting junction design that's not necessarily the most efficient, but which still works fine. And one thing I really want to put the point clear on is that nothing is wrong unless it is causing mega backlogs. Like, even something that's less efficient could still work fine. So just remember that. Most efficient thing is not necessarily the only right thing. Anyway, to go back to what's most efficient, let's go back to the initial design because I want to talk through why it's most efficient. So, what you want to avoid in any junction is conflicting movements. Now this is where one train has to get in the way of another train, and that would cause at least one of those trains to end up waiting around. Now, unless you have a fully grade separated junction with everything all very complicated, you are going to have at least some conflicting movements. This is totally normal. But for the most efficient junctions, you want to minimise these. And the way I like to minimise these is by doing this. If a train is coming in on this right-hand track as they are on this map. I've set it up as right-hand traffic, and this is coming into any of these 3 platforms here, not this one, I'll explain why in a moment, then a train leaving on the left-hand side of it should be able to leave, come down this track without interacting with it. Basically, if you could draw a straight arrow from where the train is entering to its platform, and a straight arrow from where another train is leaving to its exit track. Now, if those arrows don't cross over, then the trains should not have any conflicting movements. That's how you create an efficient junction. Obviously, you don't always need to do this. That's just a good test for how to create the most efficient flat junction. So what about this station I showed you earlier? Why is this not efficient? Well, I put the crossover here. There's then a junction straight after it. Now, one problem could be, for example, if you've got a train coming in on this track, going to the left-hand platform, and one coming in on the right-hand track, going to the right-hand platform, they have to conflict. There is no way for them to be separate, but they're still staying on the same side of each other. I could draw straight arrows, and they're staying on the same side of each other. This is why the crossover should not be here. I will show you where the crossover should be. The crossover should be here, or crossovers, plural, because what is good to do is when you have 2 things junctioning and immediately merging into a station, it's good to set up these tracks before they merge. Now, for example here, I think this station could actually do with more platforms because there are so many trains coming in, particularly for cargo, so I am just going to sort that out now. So, that is now set up with 2 platforms for each of passenger and cargo, and the tracks split into those 4 before they merge from the 2 routes. Now, you don't need to understand how these junctions work, just understand that they do, and just understand that that cargo train just left whilst another one was arriving, and this is all seems to be working with parallel arrivals and departures. So yeah, it seems to be working, doesn't it? And despite there being a lot of trains here, this is not really getting held up at all, so that is all good. So, we've talked about terminus stations, but what about stations where there are through trains? Maybe there are some bypass trains, maybe there is a mixture of through trains and turning around trains. What do you do then? Well, I'm going to show you some examples. Now, sometimes when you're building a through station, it's good to have a bypass line, and bypass lines are good because it means through trains can go through while stopping trains are stopped. Now, this is very good, but it's quite common just for a bypass station to have one platform either side, that's it done. But I've shown you here that you can play around with it a bit. Now, this might look like, I've just said I don't usually like putting passenger and cargo trains on the same platform, so why have I done this? Well, they're not actually on the same platform. This here is a little crossover, so is this here. And this allows, essentially, there are some trains that bypass through, and there are some that come off the main line into it, but actually cargo and passenger trains aren't on the same platform. This is just, as you can see, quite a long thin space for a station, so I've done these crossovers here, and it works like this. Now, because the cargo trains are generally turning around, I set up this crossover here for them. Now, there is also a crossover here for the passenger trains, but I set up this one here because, once again, it's good to have some different things. And this means that this station also flows quite efficiently. There aren't quite as many trains here, but that is one way of doing it. This station here also has a bypass line. You might be going, where on earth is this bypass line? I do not see a bypass line. Don't worry, it's over here. Basically, you don't actually need a bypass line to run through the station. Sometimes it's much more efficient to have the bypass line run round the outside and merge again later. Now, you might be asking, why would you do this? What are the advantages? Well, first of all, it means your station can take up less space, and this is probably right in the middle of a big city, quite possibly. You might want to send it round the outside where it's not taking up as much space. You're also quite possibly not holding up as much traffic. Think of all the busy level crossings you have in the middle of a town, but if your train line's running around the outside, it's less likely to be causing problems. Now, in this station itself, you'll see what I quite often like to do. Now, you've got 2 passenger platforms here. These are for through trains. Then got a 3rd passenger platform to the side for terminating trains, and then a cargo platform right on this side, which is also for trains that are turning around. Now, if I wanted to make the station more efficient, I could actually make this platform here, the middle one of the passenger platforms, be for turning around. And I can tell you why that is. These trains, if they're coming out from here, need crossover trains that are going through this platform to come out. Whereas if I had instead a crossover track from here that came into here, like this, and another one like this, then terminating trains are not crossing over any trains in the other direction while they're doing that. So that could be another way to make things more efficient. It depends on what you want to do. But once again, I'd say this station design is fairly appropriate. Now, before we go on to possibly one of my greatest recommendations for through station design, I just want to talk a bit about track layouts as well. Now, this here is quite a common junction. You just have two double track lines merging into each other, all fairly common. Now, one thing I am now going to show you is something that might surprise you. Actually, at least in the UK where I'm from, a lot of in real life junctions look a bit like this. This is another type of junction where two double track lines merge into each other. Basically, you merge this track into this one and then bring it over, and then you have this one coming off. They still don't interact with each other. The trains still act the same way. There's still conflicting movement between the trains that are crossing over from this way and coming from this way through here, but that's actually more common sometimes. And quite frankly, part of the reason is it's actually less infrastructure, but a lot of people don't think about this in Transport Fever 2. It's a thing to think about. It also works at higher speeds. For example, let me do a demonstration here. I'm going to have two tracks here, going totally straight. Now, I want some very high-speed trains, so I want a very gentle curve off this track, and you'll see that is causing a collision right now. I've got to go a bit tighter to about 140 miles an hour before it will allow me to connect off. But what if I do this? I can do a crossover that stays at 186 miles an hour to that track, and then keep it at 186 miles an hour like that. And then I've just split my tracks, totally high speed, and they stay all efficient. So that is why that junction design can actually be the best one. Other things you can do with junctions. This junction here is grade separated, basically meaning this track is above or below another track. That means it's grade separated, and that causes fewer conflicts because there are no longer any conflicting movements for trains crossing over. Now, I would say there are generally two ways to grade separate them. One is that you keep everything kind of in the same side, and the other way is you bring something round the outside to grade separate it. Now, this one will create higher speeds, but it's a bit more effort to set up. Now, the other thing you can do with train tracks and junctions is set up 4 tracks. Now, this 4-track setup here goes into these 2 tracks. It's a flat junction, but basically, trains coming down each line can go to either of the 2. But once again, if a train's coming down this track going to the right and one's going down this track going to the left, they do not cross over. So that's why it works well. Now, this quad-track line has here another set of 2 tracks merging into it. This is where you'll once again see some of what I do and what could actually be done in real life. Despite these 2 tracks going in this direction, the one going into the junction still merges into the second track, and you might be like, why do you do that? Well, you can still just have it merge over one by one into each of the tracks, and you can see what the lines do. All of them that are going in that way merge over to that one, then some over to that one. And this track here will bring us to what I think is an amazing, simple, still station design. This station has several passenger lines, all of which are continuing on to go out in the same kind of direction. They're through trains, they do not need to turn around. Now, the cargo trains stopping here are terminating trains. And this is where I like this station design. If you have terminating trains, in this case the cargo trains, you should put them in the middle, and you should have a crossover between just the platforms where there are terminating trains, and then they can merge into other lines, seen here, the bypass line. The passenger lines come out and they have their own track for a while. That's where the quad track line comes in. Now this junction here is a bit of a complicated one, including some of it underground, so for the purpose of this we're going to ignore what's happening underground, because I can just show you in one direction. Now there's a crossover here between the bypass line and the passenger stopping line. That's just so they can split into the two directions here. The cargo line has a crossover here, so once it's already do the crossover here before it merges on. So once the crossover happens, it's already split off from trains here, and then they merge in. So that's grade separated, and there's also the same thing in the tunnels here that you won't be able to see it. Now that is what's good about this station design. Obviously, if you have a lot of passenger trains, you can add more passenger platforms. What I would always do though, let's just add another passenger platform here, for example. On this side, it doesn't really matter. It's just going into one track. It can merge in as it likes. But on this side, there are two different places where it can go. And unfortunately, I'm not even sure I will be able to bring it into this one. We can try. If I just bring it out straight, we can very much try this. Yes, we can. But here's what I'm doing. I am making sure these two tracks do not merge into each other and then immediately split off each other again. If one's going into this platform from this track and one's going into the other platform from this track, they do not cross over. Once again, they do not have a conflicting movement. They can both go in at the same time. Now, one last thing I'm going to do before I am going to switch to my other save games to show you how you could use these in practice, because on this map, I've just set up some dummy train routes. There are loads of trains, but they don't really do much. And I'm going to show you a just cargo station, and you can see I have set up here a deliberately good junction design and a bad junction design, so here we go. This here is a 3-platform cargo station serving the tools factory. Ignore the fact it doesn't have any cargo, these are just dummy routes. Now, on the left-hand side, I deliberately set up a not very good junction, and the reason this junction is really not very good is because all the tracks merge in onto the main line and then have their crossover. Now this is a bit of a problem, because if a train is going out of this platform, it has got to go onto the wrong side of the main line to then cross back over. If there's a through train coming along this track, it's not going to be able to do that. And also, if there's one going into the far side platform at the same time, remember they do not need to cross over, but they do. Now here is a better junction design. First of all, these 3 tracks can all cross over independently, and there's no merging and then immediately splitting again. Number 2, I've actually given a good bit of space here between the junction, the crossover, and merging onto the main line. The reason for this is if a train has to wait here to get a platform, doesn't affect the main line, hopefully. Also, trains are going to be slowing down, speeding up as they come into the station and leave the station. Hopefully there won't be a train merging onto the main line at 25 miles an hour in this instance, which once again should cause less congestion, and also it just gives more space to have a nice smoother runoff, and more space for a crossover that actually is good and efficient here. Now, that is it for this tutorial map, but I want to show you a few more examples of train station design, because one thing I would say is generally you should adapt your train stations to your services. Basically meaning you should set up a train station that suits for the services you have. If you don't really have any bypassing trains, then why should you have a bypass line? That's just a waste of space. You could still, but it's not needed. And so you may as well use the space for other things. If you have a lot of trains that are going through, but not really many that are turning around, or even any that are turning around, you don't need loads of platforms all having a crossover out of them. That doesn't make sense. If you've got train lines that come together at a station but don't need to crossover, why make them merge and crossover? They don't need to. But sometimes also you should design services around a station if necessary. But I'm going to load up some other one of my save games, some of which have been seen on YouTube, some of which haven't, and I can show you where I would set up some different train station designs, show you some different ones, and really kind of get into the nitty gritty of what works best for different service patterns. This here is my USA map build, which, if you're wondering, I did a map tour of this on literally my first ever upload to this channel. If you want to see more of this map, then go take a look. Now, this is just a map you can get off the workshop. I had some more towns, but this was where I really got some of my first lessons in train station design from. Now, this here in Kansas City is a very busy station, and by very busy I mean very busy. There are passenger trains, cargo trains. You can see there are so many tracks here. This here is the bypass line, and there's another one for this direction here. It's once again trains running on the right. Then 4 cargo platforms, and on each side 3 passenger platforms. Now, on this side there's a junction, and I keep things relatively separate. Like, if they don't have to merge after the junction, they don't. And once again, there's a somewhat grade separated junction on this side. I just want to show you with this station how I did my service patterns, because this is really one where I realised there was a problem with my station and actually altered the services. Now, the cargo routes here, there are 3 of them. Now, these 3 cargo routes do something unusual. I'm just going to go to the grain one now. There are food plants here, so I need grain for them. What I did was I merged 2 grain farms on either side, the routes into them, to one route, and that meant I could have through services through the station. If you look at the other cargo routes, they are all through services. And you might be wondering, why do I do this? And by the way, this was done before the multiple platform select thing, by the way. Why do I do this? So, basically, a crossover takes up space and makes more conflicting movement. So in order to make cargo trains run more smoothly, what I did was make sure they don't turn around, just have 2 platforms for each direction. That works better. So, this is a nice example of a grade separated junction. It's an example of where you kind of like have some flat junctions just to have trains split across tracks, but other times have it more grade separated. So that is one example of what you can do with the station. One thing I do not talk about in my station tutorial is the possibility of separating stations. As you can see here in New Orleans, what I have done is separated out my different stations and services so that there are fewer conflicts. Why do I need to bring these cargo trains into the same station as the passenger trains when I could just have them run over there and merge in a bit later? This train here, separate line, I could just bring it into a separate station. Once again, fewer track connections, fewer conflicting movements. Now, this passenger station here is one I got off the workshop, so it's actually a complete station. It's got 8 tracks. And what I do is, because I've got 2 different lines out that way, 4 different lines out this way, because this double track here is separate to this. I've got some high-speed lines and regular speed lines on this track. The junctions are relatively flexible, so there are lots of different track connections which allow trains to cross over. Now, the reason for doing this is that it allows multiple different service patterns. But this is much better, and I mean much, much, much better than basically doing a solution where you merge everything into the same 2 tracks and then split it out again. And the reason for that is there are just more possibilities. You can see there are several ways in which several trains move at once here, and that's better than basically only allowing one train in or out at the same time. This just has more capacity. This here in Las Vegas is a bit of an unusual design, should we say. We've got 2 platforms here for the passenger high-speed line, that's relatively standard, but for the regular line I've only got 1 passenger platform, and this is through lines, by the way, but there aren't that many lines, and so what I realised here is that I don't actually need 2 platforms for passengers. Now, obviously it is more efficient to have 2 platforms for passengers, but just look here at the moment, there aren't massive queues. You can actually, even with double track lines on either side, just do it down to 1 platform and still have it work. It's obviously not appropriate for anywhere, but just a thing to think about. Like, it's not necessarily the most efficient thing, but if it isn't causing me any problems, then it's not wrong. This here in Minneapolis is a big station. It has 4 cargo platforms and 4 passenger platforms and several different lines merging into it. However, what I have done with this station is basically split it up, particularly easy to see with the passenger platforms. These 2 on this side are for turning right, these 2 on this side are for turning left. Cargo platform's a bit more complicated, but once again, plenty of options. And now I'll run onto the cargo lines here to show you what I've also done with some of these. This station here is a cargo station. This has some through trains which are just bypassing, and also some trains that come in from this direction to pick up the cargo to then go back out in this direction. Now you're wondering, why are there 3 platforms here? What the actual answer is I was feeling lazy. You see, you can just place down a 3-platform station. I am actually only using one of these platforms, the middle one, and the reason why it's the middle, they just kind of come into the middle one, back out again, they don't have to cross over any through trains. But you can just, there's nothing wrong with placing down platforms using it as a bypass line. It is much easier to place down a common 3-platform station, just decide not to use 2 of them, then go through the customizing options to get it down to exactly what you want with only platforms on tracks that you're actually doing stopping trains on. So that's another thing to consider. Going back to passenger services here, this is a very busy station here in Toronto. There are several services coming in and out, and there are even some terminating services. Now, there's this one which actually runs through this side. What I'm more considering is services that come in from this direction, terminate, and then go back out again. And you may be wondering, how do they terminate? There is no crossover here. Now, for a busy station like this with only 2 passenger platforms for trains from that direction, it's actually quite inefficient to have trains turning around in these platforms. What I instead did is place a little station here. I called it a siding, which is what this is generally referred to in railway terms. Now, I don't know why passengers wait there, but basically, you can set up a little station here which passengers aren't supposed to use. You can have the trains come out of the congested platforms, pull off the main line, come into a little platform here, then turn around again and go back out. Referred to as siding in general railway terms, it just helps trains turn around off the main line. It's quite useful in some circumstances, particularly when you have limited space at a station when you have several trains turning around. You can just bring them out to a siding, bring them back in again. Fewer crossovers, congested platforms on the main line. Now this here is an example of, this looks quite complicated for a passenger station. Just it works. It's got like several tracks for different directions. I have really set up the tracks here for the services, so there's less merging in and out, and the reason for that is like a lot of trains just, it's grade separated here, they don't need to do lots of crossovers. Once again, passenger station here, cargo station, massive transfer hub by the way, it's over here. Now you could put cargo platforms in here, but it would make it lots more inefficient, lots more manoeuvres. What you can do instead is put a cargo station somewhere else, just get trucks to bring it into the city for anything going, particularly if you've got a cargo hub. It's then much easier to set up lines around here. So, let's sum up some stuff from today. Let's go back to the tutorial map. So, we're back here at the station in Tutorial Valley. I didn't save my progress on this, so this is the older version. But let's just have some summing up as to what you should do for station design. First of all, I cannot stress enough, nothing is wrong unless you have a 5 million train tailback. Like, do whatever feels right for you, even a less efficient design. If it looks cool, if it's easier to set up, that might be worth it for you, that's not wrong. But second of all, some general tips to make things more efficient. First of all, have a go at grade separation. If it works, it will probably save some conflicting movements. Second thing, make sure junctions are their most efficient setup. If trains don't need to conflict, they shouldn't conflict. If there are 2 different lines coming into the same station, put crossovers and whatever before they merge. Another thing I would really say is design your stations for the services that run through them. You don't need loads of cargo platforms if you've only got one cargo service. You don't need loads of passenger platforms if you've only got one passenger service. You don't necessarily need bypass lines if you've not got any bypass services. But even if you've only got one, it might just be worth it to still have it run through a passenger platform, for example, or any other platform, which is a real thing to consider. And the other thing I would say is do sometimes consider kind of like having some quad track lines. It might save you a bit, and generally what I'd say is just there's sometimes a bit of a thing for creativity as well. I've shown you lots of different train station designs. And really what I love to do, and you'll see this in the series I do on Transport Fever 2, mix it up a bit. Because A, not every station has the same services, but also B, it's a bit boring if you use the same station design every time. So thanks for watching this tutorial video, and hopefully there'll be a new series out on Transport Fever 2 in a new map some point soon. Goodbye.